But you can't blame the poor biker who's had his or her bike stolen from saying, I don't give an SH1T about his social conditions, I want my bike back. The Court of Appeal, and it says every law not based on wisdom is a menace to the state.
From the perspective, I think, of the public, and certainly from a motorcyclist perspective, in terms of bike theft and such like, you can see that there's an inevitable level of frustration with it all. That nothing seems to happen, and why can we not get this problem sorted? Obviously, I think when you look at it from a position of realism, you've got to basically assume that you're never going to completely solve the problem.
Sure.
But I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the level of the problem is too high, and we should be doing something to bring the numbers down. There's currently a petition that is out there calling for giving the police stronger powers to tackle motorcycle theft and increase penalties. So there's two halves to that. One is obviously that it's calling for extra powers for the police, and they're specifically saying make it easier for the police to enter premises of suspected thieves and confiscate vehicles and tools used in motorcycles, in theft of motorcycles. Do you think that the police are limited in terms of what action they can take in a circumstance like this, or do you think this is something that they actually can do? It's really just down to having the manpower to actually carry out the powers that they've got, shall we say?
Well, personally, my response to that is the second part of your question. Yes, they do have enough powers to do it. I read the petition. I think it's just slightly under 4,000 signatures at the moment, and needs about 10. But personally, I thought it was perhaps it's unfair to say poorly drafted, but it came across as we're shouting, it's not fair. The situation we're in is not fair. These things are happening, and why aren't you doing more? And we don't need more law to do more. With the police, if they've got reasonable suspicion that stolen vehicles or stolen vehicle parts are in one of a group of maybe 10 lock-up garages in a town, and they've got reasonable suspicion and a commensurate amount of evidence that would convince a magistrate to issue a search warrant, they could go ahead and do it. So they don't need that. There's something which possibly I always felt runs through our lawmaking and law enforcement processes, and it's actually something that's carved into a statue outside the American Supreme Court of the Court of Appeal, and it says every law not based on wisdom is a menace to the state. I think particularly your article that we'll come to later on speed, that really does apply to that.
Yes.
And so
I mean, I think, as I say, I mean, I don't want to sort of like knock the petition in any way, shape, or form.
No,
I think
not
people
at all.
should sign it if they feel it's appropriate.
Absolutely, I agree.
If nothing else, it will show the level of frustration that is being felt about an issue that isn't being addressed. Possibly, we're not asking in this petition for the most effective outcome. The most effective outcome will be for more funding for police, and therefore the resource to carry out the powers that they've already got.
Sure.
But on the other side of it, the sentencing thing, again, I was looking at this. May be a little bit unfair on you because I didn't warn you before we started filming this about this one, because I've literally only just seen it this morning. There's a video gone out by Durham Police of a particular youth who was pursued by a police officer on a motorcycle, ended up crashing. Obviously, yes, he's almost certainly stolen the bike. He certainly had taken it without the owner's consent. I always get a little bit confused about the difference between the two and what difference it really makes. But yeah, this guy has, he suffered an injury in the crash that took place. which I assume the court takes into account when they're doing the sentencing. But the sentence does look a little bit weak, shall we say. He was sentenced to 14 months in a young offender institution, and banned from driving for 21 months. So the offences that he was charged for were aggravated vehicle taking, dangerous driving, driving without a licence, driving without insurance, and drug driving. So I suppose from your perspective, I mean, you've previously said, there's two things that deter crime. One is the risk of being caught, and the second is the severity of the consequences, shall we say. Do you think that there's a case to be made for the sentencing to be stiffened in cases like this, or is that unreasonable, do you think?
Well, we'll perhaps have to see what prison he's going to be squeezed into. And maybe in his 14 months, which will possibly be a lot less than that if he behaves himself, maybe in those 14 months he'll learn a few more tricks about how not to get caught the next time. We're putting these people into universities of crime.
Yeah.
Someone who's an average to mediocre car thief will come out a much better one once he's spent 6 months or a year in Wormwood Scrubs.
Yeah. Yeah. That is certainly, and again, I mean, you're not saying anything that I've not heard before. It is a case of, but certainly when it comes to the, I hesitate to use the word low-level offenders, but
the volume
for somebody like this, he's obviously a teenager. He's acted like an idiot. He's got himself involved in the chase, and yes, clearly he's involved in stealing bikes and goodness knows what else, drugs. The problem is, yes, there's two elements to the sentencing. One is obviously punishment, and the other is correction of his behaviour so that he can integrate into society as a law-abiding, upstanding member of the community in future. But I suspect that in his case, that isn't going to be the outcome of it. He's not going to feel much in terms of punishment. He's going to be given a nice warm bed, a PlayStation, and 4 square meals a day, and then come out with, you say, a large amount of training in how to be a better criminal.
Yeah, I did a study in my policing years, part of a degree study on the criminal justice system in the Netherlands, and I spent a week in and out of remand prisons in Amsterdam, as well as studying it the way that the Dutch police, it was the Amsterdam police, and they've now got a national force, which I suspect is the way this country will be going. We're trying it out in Scotland. They're always the guinea pigs for anything like in policing. The Scots always get it first, and we see if they make a mess of it, and if they don't, it gets introduced into England. But over in Amsterdam, their prisons were they had fantastic workshops. These were a remand prison that I went to in a place called Over Amstel, and the workshops were the best I'd ever seen. I studied metalwork at school. They had great equipment, great lathes. They were making things that they were almost like a limited company. They were selling them to the local supermarkets. There's a place called, slightly ironic, talking about the Netherlands, Superdrug, which is like the sort of supermarket where they were actually making not pharmaceutical products, but mirrors, combs, brushes, and other sorts of bits and pieces that you would tend to find in the Boots supermarket or something like that. They were actually a trading arrangement with these places, and the prisoners were getting a percentage of what they were making. So there was this incentive, and the whole Dutch system was based on rehabilitation. The biggest penalty that they could possibly impose on someone is the removal of their freedom. And inside the prison, they said we want how we treat them and how we look at them inside the prison should reflect how we want them to be in a better society. And that was their raison d'etre, if you like. That was their sort of the way that they were going around things. It was a very, very calm environment. In fact, the accommodation was on a par with the hotel that I was staying in. So this is the working to stop reoffending. The sort of rehabilitation process, locking someone up, and for 9 months if they're a car thief. Yeah, there'll be no car thefts committed by that person for 9 months. So prison, I don't think prison locking them up is the ultimate answer when you're dealing with someone who has been so poorly conditioned by maybe parental or societal or the circle in which they mix. And a lot of people who haven't worked in the public sector or working with people will be absolutely shocked at some of the home circumstances that some of these young people actually come from, with appalling parenting and absolutely scant regard. Some of them are 12, 13 years of age and can barely string sentences together because the parents either don't care or they expect the schools to do it for them, or the schools can't start building someone up who hasn't been socialized properly. They become disruptive kids. It is a social problem which the police and in some cases the mental health services end up dealing with. We're like the sump at the bottom of the filters, and when they get through all of those filters and end up in the bottom as this feral crime machine, that's when there's the intervention. And the intervention, it's too late. We're fighting the alligators when the swamp should have been drained years before, but by socialization. So this sort of harsh society, this harsh imprisonment system, I don't think that is the answer. It sounds like I'm some sort of bleeding heart liberal. I'm not, but I can see the sense in proper. You call it rehabilitation, but in some cases you are literally trying to rewire their character. Well, a very eminent psychiatrist who I once knew told me that there's only two things that alter someone's character, and that is mental illness or a severe blow to the head. It sounds a little bit, but that came from the consultant. Once that character is set, then all you can do is steer it and manipulate it. You will never change it.
Obviously, the natural reaction for sort of like the victim of crime, in our specific question, the guy who's had his motorcycle stolen from whatever location, the immediate reaction is the will to punish the individual, and that's entirely, understandable and to be expected. But in terms of a long-term solution, it does come back to being, it's not really about policing so much. It's more to do with, a social solution to prevent the drivers of this kind of activity in the first place, which clearly is a lot broader subject than we can probably talk about on our particular YouTube channel.
It is, but you can't blame the poor biker who's had his or her bike stolen from saying, I don't give an SH1T about his social conditions. I want my bike back.
Yes, yeah, that's it. I say at an individual level, as I've said to police and crime commissioners before, when I've been having this kind of conversation, you've got to understand it is that I'm representing the victims of this crime, and for them on an individual level, they really couldn't care less who that person was who stole it. That person needs to be caught and they need to be punished, and preferably. The victim of the crime needs to be given some support and some recompense for their loss. But that never actually seems to happen. It never seems to be forthcoming. No. So understandably, people get frustrated and angry about it.
It is.
So,
and it's a little bit like you're bored. You live in a small community, and suddenly you find that the next door neighbours who have moved in are the most obnoxious, horrible people that you've ever come across in your life, and they're making your life utterly miserable. What do you do about that? They bought the house, they're renting or whatever it is. They're your next door neighbours. Are they breaking any laws? Possibly not, but they are, by their behaviour, by their noise, by their antisocialness. They have made your life utterly miserable, and they're diminishing the life of everyone around them. How do you sort that out? You can almost extrapolate that back to the person who's going around stealing our motorcycles. At least they're breaking a law that if we eventually track them down, we can stick them in front of the court and put them in prison for 3 months until they come out again, and then they're at it again. It's this cycle of makes society sound pretty rotten, doesn't it?
does. Yes. Yeah.